Thank you so much and welcome everyone today. My name is Sachi Thompson. I'm the General Manager of Curvature, a recent acquisition of Park Place Technologies in November of 2020. Our main focus is we resell hardware. We're one of the largest resellers in the world. We've been in this space for 30 years and excited to talk to you about our offering. My core background is in operations and supply chain. So a lot of what we see and what we handle in the marketplace are a lot of your concerns as well. So happy to talk about those with the team.
Yeah, and we were just talking right before we started. There are some really interesting economic indicators going on in your world.
Yes.
I'm thinking about pulling all my money out of my 401k and just putting into used blade servers, to be honest with you.
If you can get them.
if you can find them, they're more difficult than Tesla stock at this point to find. Mike, how are you? Good to have you back. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
A little bit about yourself, Park Place, and the overarching what your responsibilities are.
Absolutely. Good morning, afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Nicholas. I'm the Vice President of Professional Services Sales at Park Place. I'm responsible for all sales activities supporting our entire portfolio of professional service offerings globally. Just a recap on Park Place and who we are. Our foundation and core has always been third-party maintenance, but we also offer infrastructure managed services, network monitoring services, software, and professional services.
Yeah, I mean that's the big thing here, right? Is if there's one thing that I want everybody to understand who's watching this right now or who is watching this later on, because it'll stay up in perpetuity. This isn't your grandmother's Park Place. Like when I was actually buying technology and I knew Park Place, I knew you from my relationships when I was buying third-party maintenance and offsetting the cost that way. You've expanded the portfolio so much that I think that it's great for people to hear time and time again that it's not just a one-trick pony at this point. It's a full portfolio of service offerings, which I think is great because we're going to talk a little bit about sustainability and IT and category management here, and we'll talk about it from 3 different areas. But at the same time, you'll see Mike's professional services take on it and Sashi's take on the curvature side of it, which is really about the equipment marketplace and things like that. So let's start with this idea of sustainability and IT operations. I mean, is this really something that's on IT's mind? Is this kind of a nice to have after everything's done? Like, you know, corporate social responsibility associated with supply diversity inclusion? Or is this now something that senior leadership is walking in the door and saying, hey, this is a mandate, we got to do this? And I'll start with Sashi and then we can go to Mike.
Yeah, obviously sustainability has been on top of mind for a lot of our customers, mostly our enterprise customers, but we've seen a significant shift post-pandemic. Candidly, I think by 2023, 60% of enterprise leaders will make this an initiative if they haven't already. It's definitely a driving force. It comes up all the time when we have RFQs and vendor selection processes. This is a big area that we go into and just show our practices and why selecting a brand like Park Place Technologies meets those requirements for you. But it is 100% more of a necessity and not just kind of a nice to have or an afterthought.
Mike, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, to Sachi's point, the 60%, that's accurate and comes from IDC. And what we're also seeing is, in the expectation from IDC is that 95% of those organizations are going to leverage some type of professional service in order to accomplish and enable technologies that support sustainability.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that for me? I apologize.
95% of the 60% of organizations that are focusing on sustainability related considerations for their business life cycle.
Yep.
95% of those will leverage professional service in some way to either implement enabling technologies or to accomplish their sustainability goals.
Nice. Great stat. Thank you so much. I appreciate
Absolutely.
that. Absolutely. Yep. So let's, I mean, we only have 24 minutes left on this, and I'm trying to stay at 30 minutes, although because I've been told that I run over from time to time. So in your eyes, how can IT and category managers be a sustainable beacon for their operations? and contribute to the overall. I mean, okay, we get it. We understand that this isn't just a nice to have anymore. This is kind of dying into the fabric of technology operations now. And we're certainly seeing that in, the energy costs, and we'll talk about inflation a little bit as well. But how is it in your eyes that IT category managers can be sustainable beacons for their operation? I mean, let's just ask the question, right,
Yeah.
of the topic of the discussion. So Sashi, why don't you
Yeah.
go first?
Yeah, so real simply put, and really just an easy way to transition and start taking this into your own organization and making it part of your DNA is buying pre-owned equipment. Secondly is taking the assets that you do have in your infrastructure and putting them under a maintenance program like Park Place Technologies and our third-party maintenance program. That's really where a lot of our customers, and it's our largest segment and our largest business line, where we help customers maintain assets for longer. They're viable, they're working, and there's no issue with that. And we're in 180 locations around the world. And that's another area where you really want to implement that. And that's pretty easy strategy to do. The other thing too is then when you talk about downstream and dealing with ITAD, and this is where Mike's organization comes into play, but recycling, doing all of that and following the responsibility of e-waste and separating the materials and data destruction properly, and just making sure that the downstream effects of the equipment are also environmentally recycled and put in the right areas and categories, which is another big area of specialty that we do as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember when we started, scrapping, right? And we started disposal assets. Our biggest concern was, hey, I got to make sure the hard drive has been degouged and I've got a certificate of death associated with my hard drives. Even though I've wiped them clean from my team, then I give them to a disposal team. I need a certificate of death. So certificate of death of a hard drive basically says, hey, listen, it's not going to end up in a landfill and nobody's going to get your intellectual property, right?
Yep, that's
but that said, now it's taken on a whole new life, Mike, right? Which is, hey, this is about taking bare metals, grinding them back down, putting them back into the space and recycling them back into the next wave of equipment now, and potentially turning your dead assets into cash, right?
That's right. And I'd kind of separate that into three areas. There's the, you started with the destruction and recycle of that material, but what we're actually seeing is, and pushing for, is reuse of those materials. And it becomes interesting when you're talking about hard drives and data. We have a lot of customers that are really struggling with going to a data removal strategy for drives that may have, critical information on it. With the penalties that come with things like GDPR, it's easier to just destroy the device and not worry about the implications of if that information gets somewhere else. So the reuse of those materials is going to be more and more prevalent. And I think it's going to drive some security and some technologies that give people better peace of mind in the removal of the critical information. From an e-waste perspective, you're absolutely right. It's ensuring that, and there's certifications out there now where you can show, R2 is a primary one, that your e-waste standards are being followed and that you're not just ending up in a landfill, that those materials are being reused as well.
Yeah.
So those are two, I think, of the most critical aspects of that.
So we talked about extending the life cycle through continuing to use through proper maintenance and getting 4 years or 5 years out of things. Lord knows I've got an HP 4000 printer somewhere around here that I think is older than my children, and she just keeps purring. God bless her. We take her out and walk around the neighborhood every once in a while and then plug her back in and she just keeps working. So the longer you can do that through preventative maintenance, that's obviously where Sashi and her team come in. And then Mike, one other thing around sustainability that I didn't connect the dots on originally, but it's interesting is one of the areas is proper management and consolidation from a professional services perspective actually has downstream effects on sustainability targets and goals, right?
That's correct. Yeah. And again, there's a couple different areas here. So one, in the starting point of that is, as you're using older technology, in many instances, that's going to be supporting critical elements of your business. So you may need to look at your monitoring strategies a bit differently and boost those up, right? If there's risk of drives failing because they're older drives, You may want to monitor those a little more actively. If you're not actively monitoring those, have a managed services company helping you with those, you may want to look at something like that.
Yeah.
So that's on the front end. I think on the other side of the equation, there's an people element to this as well, because if you're extending the use of older technology, you may need resources that have older technology skill sets to be able to support those technologies. And so it may inform you on your staffing strategies as you move forward as well.
Yeah. Just so that all of you know that are out there in the world, and anybody who's watching this or who will be watching this in the future, I am not a COBOL programmer. However, I am certified in network tree from 4.11. So if you still are running a Novell network tree from 4.11, I'm still certified, and I haven't been in one in a while, but I'll be more than happy to help. You won't like my billable rate. So really interesting there how the people side of it actually starts to contribute to the sustainability strategy as well. And I love the marriage between the two of how you two operate your businesses. If you've got a decent professional services organization who understands and can manage your portfolio of hardware and assets, you're almost intelligent enough to understand where you can hedge bets against the hardware and the used equipment markets to be able to say, hey, listen, you guys are really in a unique position to know, hey, this particular blade that we have all over the world is getting harder and harder to find. You might want to hedge your bets and buy some used X, Y, and Z blade right now, or processing board, or CPU, panels, or things like that, right? I mean, you can play the two off of each other, and the better you manage this, the more you can hedge and extend your life cycle at the same time. It almost becomes this encapsulated. I mean, it's a beautiful, probably orchestration when it works right.
No, absolutely. And it's interesting too, because that thought process really comes from the procurement side of the house, right? Mostly the engineer talent, they worry about uptime and connectivity and having latest and greatest. But because of the supply chain as it is today, and has been pretty much for the last 7 months, and is continuing to only get worse, people are having to be really creative. And so selecting a partner that not only can provide the hardware on the first pass to get it into the infrastructure, but having someone who can manage it, maintain it, we really are in a unique spot, which is really why we've seen just the increase in revenue and awareness about our brand around the world. Yeah.
By the way, everybody that's here in the room, feel free to get into the chat. Tell us where you're from. Say hello, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're from. Would love to hear where you're from. And are you thinking about sustainability? If you have any questions, feel free to jump them into the chat. Happy to bring them onto the team as we can here with about 15 minutes left. So, Sachi, let's talk a little bit about your area for a minute. Let's talk about the equipment market. And it's not getting any better, right? I mean, SKUs are getting harder to find. Raw material costs are getting more difficult to source. Downtime is a real threat in here, because if you're ordering new equipment, the lead times for order fulfillment are getting harder, probably for reasons that people can't even control. I mean, you got 37 boats outside of LA port. I don't know how much router and switch gear there is out there, or data center infrastructure gear is out there, but I assume it has to be a lot, and the delivery dates are getting I mean, is anybody even hitting delivery? Are they making comment when you buy something now? Are they giving you delivery dates, targets, or are they just saying, hey man, we're talking about sometime in Q3, and what's your overview of what the equipment market's looking like right now?
Yeah, so when we spoke about 7 months ago, the market looked, we were seeing lead times at about 90 days. We're seeing lead times at 400 to 500 days, which is unprecedented. We've never seen lead times quoted from OEMs that far out. And candidly, just being in supply chain myself, when you're quoting anything outside of a year, you really have no idea what is really going to come forward and what's happening. A lot of it isn't just pandemic related. It's, different country related issues in China, as you see them closing down a lot of the core manufacturing cities. And then now with the war in Russia, neon gas is a real concern, and that's critical in switchboard manufacturing and chip manufacturing. And so what we've really seen, if we just take it down to today, and what we're seeing pretty much in the first quarter of the year, is Every category that we sell is almost being blown out. People are coming to us frantically, not only asking for a few items, they're asking for hundreds of items because they have pent up demand that they've postponed for 2.5 years, waiting for the recovery of the pandemic, and now they can no longer wait. And so really just seeing a sheer kind of immediate response from our customers saying, we need to find a solution. There is not one. We can no longer wait. Please help us. So we're selling recent generation, 5 generations back, your old printers, things like that, that you'd never think people are coming out and asking for. The demand is really fierce. We've seen nothing like this in the 25 years that I've got some sales reps that have been with me that entire time. They've seen nothing like this. A lot of inflation too is driving up the cost of used equipment. So in some cases, you're seeing used product that's 3 years old selling for list price, even higher than list price. All the OEMs have also done a pretty significant increase on list price items, especially on the ones that are hard to find. And so we really take a consultative approach with our customers. We simply ask them, if you absolutely need it, here it is. But if you don't, let's bring in maintenance and some of our other services to help you maintain this environment a little bit longer. We've always been known as a price category driver and a cost savings driver, but really a lot of the reasons why people use pre-owned and have is because it's available and we can get it quickly and we don't disrupt your infrastructure. And so right now what we're seeing though is a new audience of customers that only were buying new, that we're refreshing every 3 years, that were, had a tremendous amount of capital that they can spend and never really cared about the expensive things. And so that's really not the case right now.
I'm curious if you're seeing organizations, probably the larger, more mature organizations, starting to put guidelines in place where strategic sourcing of used and refurbished equipment is part of their sourcing strategy to hit their sustainability goals. And they say, hey, listen, 10% of our acquisitions in order fulfillment is going to come out of the refurbished market because it helps facilitate our sustainability positions. Are you starting 100%. Are you starting to see guidelines and programs like that where IT organizations and IT category managers are starting to actually put a stake in the ground and commit to percentages of buying power?
100%. I'm actually seeing it more in Europe than I am in the US. I think US is coming around a little bit, but really big initiatives in the UK mainly. And in a lot of the other larger European nations where they're saying, hey, we'll give you rebate dollars or resource dollars, especially coming out of the pandemic. And in that conjunction, though, those dollars need to be spent on pre-owned equipment. That's still in life, still very viable, but to also hit a sustainability charter as well.
So are you saying that some of the sovereign countries in Europe are starting to incentivize corporations to buy refurbished used gear?
Yeah, they're lining out those funds to be repurposed that way, which is the first time we've seen that.
Wow. That's I mean, obviously the United States is a little bit behind on that. I'm not surprised that Europe is that way because distribution channels for technology in Europe tend to be a bit of a sideshow. Knowing that I used to handle IT category management for a global organization, buying and distributing technology in the North American corridor is much easier than buying it in Europe and getting it across country lines.
All the compliance requirements and it being
the compliance.
And they're looking
taxes.
at all of the downstream effects too, the logistics, the port cargo, the gas usage, the environmental impacts of just moving gear in and out is really critical. So that's been a nice thing to see driving that market as well.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but my biggest problem used to be the plugs. The different types of energy, the plug it into the wall plug, like the actual plug. We used to have problems with getting the right plugs in the right location. So that was always a big problem. We
sell the right plugs and we send refurbished gear to those.
Yeah, I'm like this plug works in France, but it doesn't work in Germany. There's a problem. Okay, so thank you so much for that. Great insights as to where it's going. I wanted to ask a question. So this isn't just a North American phenomenon. This really is truly a global phenomenon at this point, right, Mike?
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
And Sashi, your inventory, your ability to provide gear in that space, Is it North American? Is it global? Are you able to provide Asia Pac?
Yeah, we have a global inventory position. We saw these trends, like I said, about a year ago. Really, it's our business and our purpose to take basically the stock that's available and corner the market, just because we know how this works, and this is a unique time for us. And so we've been really fortunate to have quite a bit of stock. What I will tell you though is, as this continues to delay, we see things start to dry up and certain edge categories dry up. And really what we're doing with customers is giving them a bridge solution with some technology, or, putting things under maintenance as well to get them through it as well. Another new thing we're seeing from clients is, they're dealing with a lot of our larger global clients. They'll take infrastructure out of one market, have us work on it, refurbish it, recertify it, and then move it into another market for them. And that's unique too. And I think that's just sheer out of, I need to use this and repurpose it. We're making this area go dark. We're rebuilding this area too. So finding a partner who could do that is really unique and rare. And so that's really where Mike and I's team come into play, and really can make an impact for our customers, both on a labor standpoint, but then on a repurposing of their own equipment and their own assets.
I got to be honest with you, that doesn't surprise me, given the fact that you're seeing 500-day lead times. It's like, all right, listen, I'm going to dismantle this data center. I need somebody to wash, clean, house, inventory, reschedule, refurb, re-inventory, recertify this thing, put it in a container, ship it across the country to a new data center that I'm building in New York City or Alabama or someplace else, right? I mean, that just makes sense to me, because I can get that done in 90 to 120 days as opposed to 500 days. If I project plan that out appropriately, and then I don't have to buy other gear. I mean, we used to be in the business of, okay, if I was closing something down on the West Coast, let's dispose of that. And if I'm buying something new on the East Coast, great, let's build out the latest Chris in the East Coast. And that's going to be wreaking. I mean, it's interesting. At some point, I'm going to get a CFO on and talk about this, because I want to understand the financial OpEx versus CapEx play there. Let's talk financially for a second about inflation, right? Inflation is painful at this point. And I suspect that it's not sparing this market either. Is that correct, Mike?
Absolutely. We're seeing it in every piece, down to the cardboard, down to the labor, down to the logistics, the fuel surcharges, the hardware. It's real. We try really hard not to push that onto our customers. We keep them educated. We let them know, as we've seen market trends fluctuate within weeks, within days, candidly. And so we try to stay on top of that too, but it is 100% an impact to the market.
Mike, one of the things you talked about was converting assets into cash, right? On the disposal side of things. I think that's really interesting. And I'm wondering, is inflationary pressure driving the disposal market even higher? So what you used to dispose, I used to dispose a laptop and I'd get X amount of money for the laptop, right? And now it's being, hey, they're not sticking this thing in a grinder anymore. They're actually taking the time to deconstruct this thing and take the components out so that the components can get reused into some other area, right? So is that causing reverse inflationary capabilities, meaning you can sell your assets more and turn your assets into more cash now than you could, even 7 or 10 months ago?
Yeah,
absolutely. Go ahead, Sachi. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, our buyback and our trade-in program, we're buying things back for much higher than even market that we're seeing, just for that specific reason.
Yeah, I mean, I know we were kidding about this in the pre-read, but I can sell my used car in my driveway right now that's on lease for more than what I paid for it when I bought it 24 months ago.
Yep.
And I'm not kidding. I might pull some money out of Bitcoin and stop buying used Cisco routers. I think that there might be more upside in that market than in Ethereum right now. All right, let's talk about disposal a little bit. How are some of the, and I know we just talked about some of that. What are some of the, I want to just jump on that really quickly, then I want to come back to Mike and talk a little bit about professional services. In fact, you know what? I think we've beaten that horse a little bit. I don't have a lot of time left. I'm just going to jump right to Mike on that, because I think we've talked about some of the best practices associated with disposal right now. If you have more interest and you have assets available right now, whether you want to dispose them, whether you want to put them through the car wash and repurpose them into your environment somewhere else, these are the folks to talk to about doing that. They've got some great programs that they've already talked about here. Perfect golden nugget. Thank you very much for that. Mike, let's talk about management and professional services on this equation, because this is the part that I have trouble connecting the dots on. not everybody thinks about professional services and how it equates to sustainability outcomes and how professional services can do that. So can you talk to me a little bit about how that all works? I know we talked on it a little bit earlier, but I want to talk about that, and especially around the personnel side of it. That would be great.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So obviously, we've already talked about the ITAD or IT asset disposition equation portion of that. To your point, we've beat that to death. I did mention previously when you talk about infrastructure management, though. So managed services type opportunities and functions, and ensuring that you are monitoring these older assets is one side of the equation. On the other side of the equation, you have, a lot of activity happens within the data center today. So we're seeing greater use of even some older technologies to minimize trips to the data center. Terminal server, remote desk functions, et cetera. And I anticipate that there's going to be a continued growth in probably on the software side of the equation to enable more of those remote functions. So keep your eyes open for those. But from a people perspective, we offered managed services functions and offers to our customers today. We can help do that monitoring. The other thing that you can think about is consolidation of applications and usage, or looking at the non-use of the equipment that you have in place. So professional services can often help you build a strategy around consolidation opportunities, maybe a data migration, data consolidation, data management opportunity to lessen your footprint and your power consumption for your storage devices. Those are some of the key areas that you can focus on from a professional services perspective. And back to this visit to the data center, we have a couple customers that, and again, European, that have really pushed towards a model that consolidates visits to the DC. Yeah. So we're actually going in and doing repairs. They've turned that actually into a professional services program, and we'll gather tickets and then actually go to the DC in one visit, take a truckload of parts with us and hit 100, devices all at the same time.
Right.
So we are seeing some of that activity to grab hold as well.
So this is really interesting, right? I mean, for me, sustainability, I tell people this all the time. One of two things is going to happen on your sustainability. For either you learn how to negotiate your kilowatt hour down, if it's electricity, for example, or maybe you just shut the damn light off. You know what I mean? Either way, you're helping yourself out on that front. And this is a perfect example. I'm interested to know long-term whether or not, it kind of makes sense to me, which is, hey, if you're doing proper maintenance management of your ecosystem, yes, you're reducing your carbon footprint by taking less. Terminal server is a perfect example. Remote desktop support services for asset management and things like that, troubleshooting, so that you don't have to actually have people shipping things in from FedEx or UPS or things like that, plus the actual burn time of the carbon footprint of somebody getting on a plane and going out and servicing things like that, right? But at the same time, I'm interested in, are you starting to see sustainability profiles of data center assets, like, hey, listen, this server cluster is on this version and consumes 20% more power per IO than this cluster, so we're going to hold off on that processing until later tonight when energy is cheaper, and by the way, it's got a 20% less burn rate from an energy suck perspective on IO, right? Yeah. Is it getting that well fine-tuned yet?
It's not there yet that we're being exposed to, but to your point, I could see it potentially getting there. You mentioned kind of the carbon footprint based on fuel. So a couple years ago, a study was done, and the power consumption and footprint from IT equipment is the equivalent of all air travel. The fuel consumption of air travel. So you could see potentially at some point some type of government restriction or some type of offering similar to what Sashi talked about previously in the UK, saying, hey, if you do this, we'll cut taxes, we'll give you some type of incentive, et cetera.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that like the UK is starting to actually incentivize organizations to increase their sustainability strategies across
Yeah, we're
the
seeing in
technology thing.
Germany and in France and other markets too. I think one of the other things too, Mike, is just, around being a sustainability beacon. The difficult part that I see a lot of customers face is, how do you track it? How do you report it? How do we implement something like this? And so really that's what we're focused on too as a brand, as we start to pilot some of these larger enterprise programs that we're doing. That will be another area that we'll spend some time and focus on as well, because we have all the infrastructure and the parts to create that offering. It's really now, how do you get down to the right level of reporting and standards? But that will also come to from a social level from governments, right? And so being as large as we are and across so many different markets, it's easy for us to kind of build something like that out to provide that tool as well going forward.
I got a bunch of questions. I want to jump on some of them, even though we're over time. I do want to get some of these questions. Eileen says, what tools or technologies are available to monitor and track performance and manage forecast equipment usage, life cycle, et cetera, for category managers, as well as manage supplier performance on ESG and sustainability, et cetera? I don't know. I mean, obviously, Park Place offers a service that does that. But there are some tools that are in the marketplace. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and Eileen, it's interesting. One of the things that we have internally is that we match markets and we know the availability and kind of the right exit strategy on equipment, but that's all proprietary and internal. And so typically what you'll find when you become a partner of ours or a customer of ours, we'll work with you on exactly that. We'll partner with Mike's team. We'll look at what you're looking for to refresh. We'll tell you what we have that we'd like to take out. We'll be very consultative and tell you what needs to be under support and maintenance longer, and these are the reasons why. And then we can give you market trade-in, which is huge. That's not really typical of larger or smaller resellers that people are typically used to working with. So it's really important, if you have an opportunity or a strategy like that that you want to implement, that you select a person of our company of our reach and size. Another interesting question that I see in the chat room too is, what do you see a relief coming in the future supply chain? Candidly, I was on this show and I thought, by June 1st, and we know the market and trends really well, that it would start to ease up, and it just really hasn't. I think the positive side is on the server and storage side of the manufacturing supply chain side. It's not as bad as it is on the networking side. And so really kind of figuring out what your infrastructure plans are. Those of you, typically the normal cycle would be, we do budgets in December, we roll out our plans and our initiatives, we keep them kind of honed in. What I see IT resources struggling with procurement is, hey, we need to be buying a year out. We can't even be thinking about quarterly or strategically quarterly, because unfortunately the lead times just continue to be delayed. And so really where we're seeing customers ask us to hold stock, ask us to do things, we even do buyback programs too, because they can't cancel their OEM agreement, so they need some transition inventory. We don't know what the market availability and pricing will look like, but we're really honest about what it is trending at. So whatever you buy from us, we will offer a buyback for it, whatever market is at the time. So that's something to consider as well.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. It's almost likens me to consumer packaged goods in the Christmas rush. If you haven't ordered your Christmas materials for your retailer location by January 15th of that year, you're probably not going to have much stuff on the shelf at Christmas, right? So you're buying for next year now. I think that's really interesting that we've gotten there in the technology space. Curious if you can, it says, so another question, curious if you can call out any innovation coming out of the equipment supply chain crisis that makes you optimistic for the future.
Not the short term, unfortunately. A lot of conversations around microchips being manufactured in different markets in the US, but let's be honest, it's 2-3 years away from now. It's a tough time for the OEM. We feel it too. All the brands we carry, even on the pre-owned side, we're emphatic about it. We love the companies. That's why we sell them. It's a tough time. And so we're even helping a lot of OEMs sell inventory back to them in their own infrastructures because they can't get it. It's a very unique time. And so really the best thing to do is, what we're trying to do is assemble the market, really provide takeout. 35% of our inventory comes from our customers. We cover the largest array of customers from a pre-owned perspective as a brand. So we're really comfortable to take big, large lots out, repurpose them, refurbish them, and then bring them back out to market. And we'll just continue to do that, and really leading with just asset recovery and ITAD, mainly just from a market perspective, and to hold good inventory and keep it moving and keeping it available.
Gary asks, I'm sorry, I'm just going to rapid fire these because they're fantastic questions. Gary says, with the limited sourcing equipment available, are there certain areas that have priority versus others, i.e. government, healthcare, things like that? Or is it just the person with the biggest wallet wins that day?
Yeah, unfortunately, we cover all verticals, all markets. I would say healthcare, government's probably the last to be really alert and on top of overbuying and getting ahead of stuff. You know, we see a lot of retailers taking good position, data centers, just because more cloud usage is happening. Unfortunately, we don't do a priority at the moment. And I know the OEM does, but I think all of their categories are under pressure right now. So they're just trying to find available equipment that they can support customers with.
Yeah. Let's see. Those are all the questions that I have, and we're 10 minutes over. So I'm gonna wrap it there. I'm sure there are more questions. Tons of food for thought in this. A dozen golden little gems that we just crammed into 37 minutes. Sashi, thank you so much. Mike, thanks so much.
Thank you.
We got to get back and talk about this more, because this is an evolving situation. And I think what's really interesting about this is it's truly turning into a commodity market, just like, you know, frozen concentrated orange juice and pork bellies. I think that this is a really interesting phenomenon that's taking place. And I think people who are starting to think about life cycle and working with their IT organizations to try and determine what their strategy is around life cycle and management and upkeep, you have to understand something. If you're calculating the proper time when you need to start thinking about refurbishing equipment, I can remember thinking, okay, we're going to do it on a 3-year life cycle. And for Apple laptops, we're going to do it on a 4-year life cycle. But if I'm leasing that equipment, it's usually right around month number 30 where the ROI on the buyback is, where I can then upgrade, get the latest and greatest, and get it back out into the secondary market and take advantage of the maximum amount of buyback in the secondhand market. With the inflationary pressures and the responsibility and the sustainability drive right now on multiple geographies, that calculation is probably changing on a day-to-day basis.
100%.
And if you don't have somebody like Curvature and Park Place who are in the market every day and understand what's in demand, you're going to have a hard time looking smart in front of your IT stakeholders when you tell them what the life cycle probably is here. So certainly, thank you so much for your time, Sachi and Mike. I really, really appreciate it. And we're definitely going to talk again. Hey, thanks to Park Place for being a permanent residence partner of Procurement Foundry. We love all the content that we come to you with Park Place. More to come on that front. I know Park Place and Procurement Foundry are doing more together over the next few months and into the future. And thank you, guys. Really appreciate you taking the time to educate us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, everybody. If you have more questions, you can reach Park Place either through the connections on the LinkedIn feeds and all the other feeds, because we're going to tag them, but also inside of Procurement Foundry, they have a channel that you can contact and reach them. And I'm sure Mike and Sashi can be found in any platform.
Yep, that's correct.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks again. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.